Okay, America, y'all know who it is. We are back in the lab. Real Greg Kelly Show. It's been a minute. Oh my God, but things are on fire in the world. And I know y'all know it. If you have not liked the channel, have not subscribed, do it tonight. Tonight we are going to go take a in-depth look at what's really going on. Woo! What's up, y'all? Yeah. I mean, it's getting deep, man. It's getting real out here. Man, it's getting so real that once again, it's like mainstream media lying to us again, like we really can't see what's happening. Hey, but a lot of people do not know what's happening. They have no idea. And that's why we here. That's why we do what we do. Yeah, that's why we come out here and put these shows out, is so people can just get a different perspective of maybe some things they have not heard, because we do know people are controlling the information flows. They don't want us to know what is going on behind the scenes. Some have even called it the deep state. And I just think it's imperative for Americans to pay attention right now, in particularly, tongue twister. But I'm here tonight to tell you that everything isn't always what it seems. I do believe that enough of us here tonight and people all over the world have been witnessing, some of the most treacherous activities, some of the most treacherous ideals being enforced upon people, not just in this country, but in countries abroad. And I think we need to take a real in-depth look at it tonight. And we will take an in-depth look at it tonight. And thank all of you for being here tonight to share with me what I'm going to share with you. You're sharing in it with me tonight. Again, I love America. I love the American people. I love this Constitution. And I know you do too. But the real question tonight is, why is Vladimir Putin taking such actions that are harming people? It's like, we love American people. We love people in general because we're generally good people. But he's taking innocent lives, though it appears. I mean, we're only getting one side of the story. And I think that warrants another look at what's really happening from another perspective. There's information out here that nobody has seen, that some of you may have, and there's information that'll never be seen on any mainstream media outlet in this country. So tonight we're going to take a look at that. I'm your host, Greg Kelly, and thank you again for tuning in to the Real Greg Kelly Show. We are going to take an in-depth look at some information that may be new to you, but I think it's worth exploring, and then you get to decide for yourself. If you can look behind me and you see the map behind me, you see red and blue. Something that we as Americans are very familiar with. But tonight, we're going to look at Russia being surrounded by blue and exactly what that may mean for the Russian people. So bear with me tonight as we go through and take this look. I pray everybody participate. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll put the number up to call into the show if you would like to do so. But we're going to go surrounded by blue right in a few seconds. All right. All right. Let's get into this. Let's not waste any time. So the first thing I think we should probably take a look at here tonight is Glenn Beck from Blaze TV. Shout out to those brothers and what they do, the work that they do to support the American people, in the name of independent media. I think it's a beautiful thing. But I want you to check this out. I want you to look at this. Listen to what Glenn is saying and ask yourself, number one, have you ever heard of it? And number two, is it important to what we're witnessing take place in real time with Russia, Ukraine, NATO? I wanted to really touch NATO. I think that the clips we'll watch tonight will answer a lot of our questions, but I want you to think about this one thing that I'm about to share with you. This one thing about NATO and this title, Surrounded by Blue. NATO, in essence, is the military arm of the United States. The military arm of the United States. And if you look at the positioning on this map behind me, there's a red state called Russia. There's a ton of blue states called NATO. Surrounded by blue. That's what Russia is. And I want you to think about that when you're listening to what you're about to hear from Glenn Beck and a few others. Is Vladimir Putin who America's government is telling us that he is? Clip one, Glenn Beck.
Russian President Vladimir Putin claimed in a speech on Monday that Ukraine was completely created by the Soviet Union in the aftermath of the 1970 Bolshevik Revolution. Ukraine, I'm quoting, an inherent part of our history, culture, spiritual space. There are comrades, relatives, not only colleagues, friends, but also our family, people we have blood and family ties with, Putin said. Okay, that doesn't sound good. And then he went into this really weird history lesson. Remember, he's the guy who said the fall of the Soviet Union is the biggest error in modern history. But
which is a strange thing to say about that particular century. There's a lot of big events that happened there.
Yeah, right. However, I don't think he means the fall of the Soviet Empire, of the Soviet Union. He means the fall of the empire. Because yesterday he went on to take on Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev for giving away parts of the Soviet Union to Poland, Hungary, and Ukraine.
Okay. All right. So that's good information. What's going on, Brooke? I see you, sis. Good to have you with me. All right. So historically, Vladimir Putin has some deep roots in his history. He knows some of the actions that were taken by former leaders of the Soviet Union, which was a huge, powerful empire, by the way. Notice there were some countries named like Hungary and Poland, Romania also, but these regions were once part of the Soviet Union. And what we are hearing in America's mainstream media outlets is that Putin has this fixation with trying to recapture the glory of the old day. And that will make him an authoritarian. That would make him someone that's taking something that doesn't belong to him. And I think that's a big no-no. But on top of that, this is complex. I mean, I'm just going to say it because it's complex because there's so many different potential mindsets that Vladimir Putin has, and not many people are actually talking to this guy. A lot of people are just hearing what people on the news are saying, and they're giving their idea about what they think it is. And he did have a conversation of which I have the transcript, but when it comes to what's being shown, we don't see a lot of what Vladimir Putin is saying. But again, Glenn Beck, it's going to come from a historical perspective, and it kind of justifies that maybe Putin's on this authoritarian trip, like a little Hitler. He's going to go and capture some stuff. But I think it's a little bit more to that. And I hope you pay attention to the rest of what Glenn Beck says, because it kind of changes the narrative a little bit, or at least, gives us a different perspective to look at. Here we go.
He said that these guys are responsible for taking apart the Russian Empire. Well, don't you still have Lenin on ice there in front of the Kremlin? Why is he one guy, Alexander Dugin? If you've ever read Alexander Dugin, this could have been written by him. He was talking all about the core values that we have and the religion that we all celebrate, and the rise up of the old Russian Empire, the pre-modern empire. It was scary stuff if you know what you are looking for. I don't know what his intention is. He looked crazy. He sounded crazy. If you look at what he said, read what he said, it sounds crazy. But if you know Alexander Dugin and what he preaches in Russia, it's a fourth political theory. Now, I don't know if he was doing it because he has adopted this crazy philosophy, or he just wants people to think he's crazy, so they're like, don't screw with him. He's got a twitchy eye.
That's a great observation. However, at this very moment, I want to take you guys' attention to something that Angry Conservative had to say. Listen to this at Real Greg Kelly. So, Real Greg Kelly show. So could it be Putin thinks that president of Ukraine is just a puppet for the West? Brother, I think that's exactly what he thinks. I'm absolutely convinced that Putin has an issue with the culturalistic ideas of the West finding itself on the territory of Russia, on the borders of Russia also. I'm not going to get ahead of myself tonight. I promise to be contained and on topic. I agree with that. I think that's true. And I think Glenn Beck's going to build on it a little bit further here. Again, this is the Real Greg Kelly Show. Thank you for tuning in. This is going to be a hell of a night. Just bear with me and pay attention to the remaining things that Glenn Beck has said, and take notes. Take notes. You want to hear this, and you want to weigh it against what's being said in mainstream media, just to check.
One way or another, it doesn't really matter. Putin threatened yesterday a bloodbath if Ukraine resists the loss of territory, because he took 2 states, and they have the Russian separatists in those 2 states. But what happened was when they took over Ukraine, they killed almost all the Ukrainians. And then they sent in all of these Russian families and said, you, and you're moving to Ukraine. But I don't. You're moving to Ukraine. So they moved to Ukraine, and they've raised their family. And in these 2 particular states, there's a lot of Russian ties. Okay. And so they've always claimed that these really are Russian states. The Ukrainians say, no, it's a Ukrainian state, but you just sent a whole bunch of Russians in here. And so yesterday he just took them and then signed a document, said, yep, they're ours now.
Okay. I mean, all right. So he's talking about the Russians taking people or taking territories. And we're just going to call it our own, right? But tell me where in the history of NATO or the history of America, has America ever done anything remotely close to this? It will go into a country, just wondering, for my people who are American and do know what's been happening in the past and some in the present. Americans show up, establish a democracy, infuse the culture of, America into foreign nations, and maybe even move some Americans into these countries and begin to propagate, so to speak, create an American presence there, not only militarily, but on a cultural level, just in a regular day, everyday people. We have Americans running around on foreign soil. So in other words, if we do it, it's okay. It's not that bad if the Russians do it, or the Chinese do it, or the Japanese do it, or the Koreans do it. In other words, this is what happens when cultures intermingle. But yet somehow America is bolstering these actions up as some type of terroristic action or something we've never seen, heard, or done before ourselves. Keep paying attention.
Well, he recognized their independence.
Yes, thank you. Yes, you're right.
And then send troops immediately in, which is what you do with a new independent country.
Right, when you recognize, we're just recognizing them. That's all we're doing, and sending in troops. It's not an invasion.
No.
Okay, so that's pretty much what our government said. It's not really an invasion. And this is what this is what Joe Biden said in a gaffe, quote unquote. It wasn't a gaffe. He's just so senile. He doesn't know what he's saying sometimes. He's like, oh, that was secret. I wasn't supposed to say that. He has spoken in the past about we'll see what kind of invasion it is. If it's just like a little incursion, then we're not going to do much. Well, I got news for you. The rest of the world is doing a lot. We're not. But why?
Now, my brothers and sisters, is that not a good question? Why are we not taking military action against Ukraine? I mean, it kind of makes you say, like, why is Joe Biden, the gaff master himself, or why isn't one of his handlers saying, hey, Joe, we have to do something, bro? The Russians are going to take Ukraine. Ask yourself, why would someone even come and tell Joe Biden that? And I will give you my idea. I can't say this is factual. This is just what the pieces of the puzzle seem to be forming out for me. I know, America, we remember when Joe Biden was, doing underhanded business with his son Hunter in Ukraine with an energy company called Burisma. Ukraine was notoriously being tagged or branded as a corrupt government, a corrupt anything, somebody that was just in the mud getting dirty and, just bringing in millions of dollars that somehow don't have any connection to Burisma, but they're just getting contracts and energy deals from all over the place. But Joe Biden's son, Hunter, is sitting there getting a whole bunch of money to do who knows what, because he has no history in energy whatsoever, but he's there. So could it be that America's not taking action because taking action would expose the Biden family? Is it that the Americans are, or us, America, and I say us because there's a difference between the America of old and the America today, and I'm not so sure I can identify as, I'm an American, but I can't wrap my mind around what's called democracy in this country. And I don't mean to rant on about this, but there seems to be a break. There seems to be a divide in this country. And I think there's been one for a while, but there seems to be a divide in this country about what direction the country's going in and what our identity in the world is going to be. Because right now, I promise you, we're seeing as tyrants ourselves. And it's interesting, we keep calling Vladimir Putin a tyrant or, a domestic terrorist in his own country, amongst his own fellow Ukrainians. If he's taking this action, it's for a reason. That's all I'm saying. I don't take his side because I don't think there's anybody right on this side. I don't think there's anybody right at this time, I think the actions of both sides are erroneous. But all I'm trying to tell you is that don't believe what you're hearing. Do your homework. And I'm trying to bring some homework to the table. I'm going to shut up. Here we go. I talk too much. I'm sorry. Here we go.
Let me tell you about the part of his speech that no one will talk about. No one's going to talk about the Alexander Dugin stuff because they don't have any idea what it is. I'm telling you, if you don't know who Alexander Dugin is and you're interested in world affairs, especially what Russia is up to, you should read The Fourth Political Theory. Your hair will fall out. Okay. It actually, you'll read the first part of it, a few chapters, and you'll be like, yeah, that's right. Who's going to tell us what our heritage should be? Who's going to tell us what religion we've got to practice and tell us that our girls have to be alone on the swim team and that guys can't have babies? Who's going to? There's a lot in there that you'll go, yeah, it's there for a reason. It's there to scoop up all of the disenfranchised people.
Does any of that sound familiar, America? Let's scoop up all the disenfranchised people. At least in this country, the disenfranchised people is a theory. Because there are too many disenfranchised people that are so-called disenfranchised that are a part of the franchise. Eating the Big Mac and the fries. They riding around in some of the most expensive cars and living in some of the most expensive real estate that this country has to offer. Living the American dream. And yet somebody is still branding the disenfranchised as disenfranchised. I say it without saying it, and I know you guys get it. Let's continue.
You're going to agree with some of the stuff he says, and then you're going to, if you're smart, you won't get wrapped up in the rah, and you'll see, okay, wait a minute. What's his plan? Armageddon? He's really for Armageddon. It will take Armageddon to reset the whole world. Yeah, I'm not for the Armageddon party. Maybe that's just me. Okay, so here's what he said, Putin. He talks about going in and the problems of Ukraine. And then he says this. At the time, radicals were becoming more and more brazen, and their claims were becoming bigger and bigger. So they had no problem to influence the weak power that was weakened by the virus of corruption. And they were replacing cultural, economic, social interests of the people, actual sovereignty of Ukraine by speculations on nationalist ground. Cultural, economic, and social interests were being changed. Who does that sound like? Who could possibly change those? Who was over in 2014 to 2016 that could have possibly influenced cultural, economic, and social norms?
Somebody answer that question. Who could have been in Ukraine in 2014 influencing culture, economics, social affairs, educational affairs, affairs of morality? Morality. Who could have been in that region doing that during that time? Who was president during that time? What were they doing? What fires were they starting? What policies were they enacting that were in direct conflict with the people of the region, the Aboriginals, the people who were there before they arrived? I'm talking about the democratic war machine called NATO. Where do the pieces of the puzzle fit, America? Where do they fit?
In case you don't know yet, he says, stable statehood hasn't been built in Ukraine, and the political electoral procedures, who could have changed those, served as just a screen to divide power and assets between oligarch clans. In a minute, who is giving money to the oligarch clans? Corruption that's a problem in a lot of countries, including Russia. Ukraine has become a thing of its own. It's been corroding the entire system. As the branches of the state and radicals use the unhappiness of the people, fear and happiness, so they rode that we have, and they turned 2014 into a coup d'etat. They were backed by foreign states. From the data that we have, the support of the so-called protest camp, the Independence Square in Kyiv, came from the U.S. Embassy.
Oh my God. Did they have riots and protests in Russia? They did. They were unhappy. Somebody is capitalizing on the unhappiness of the people. I wonder who this was. I was looking in the chat. A lot of people got it right. Barack Obama was in Ukraine. There's something different. There's something different here, man. It's almost like you hear the word America, you think democracy. But this nation is not a democracy. Never has been. Wasn't established to be. It was established as a republic. A constitutional republic. Has a document that governs the bodies of government and law in the country, and it grants to peoples its freedoms. Cannot be taken away. Now, that would put us in the color bracket of red. Russia, USSR, was also a republic. It was a socialist republic, but nevertheless a republic. It put Russia in the red category. And if you looked at the map that was behind me in the backdrop earlier, I'll show it again soon. There's a red state called Russia, surrounded by blue states called NATO. Democracies established by American democracy. But these are not the patriots of this country. These are not the people that support the Constitution in this country. We know our government has been infiltrated. If we don't know about now, we'll never know. It's just uniquely strange to me that nation states that represent democracy, and these people say that they are anti-authoritarianism, but what I'm witnessing, and what I think I'm witnessing based off the information that's presented to us, those that holler and scream and declare peace are the ones that are making the wars. Let's continue.
It was $1 million per day. And additionally, large amounts of money were transferred to the private accounts of the leaders of opposition, and we're talking about tens of millions of dollars. Boom. Now, if you happen to watch our special on the impeachment of Donald Trump, we found all kinds of bad stuff going on in Ukraine with Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, George Soros, and Barack Obama. Millions just lost. Gone. What happened? We were actually doing training a year before, maybe 2 years before, 2014. We trained those people how to do a coup d'etat.
Okay, so we had some organized Marxists, some trained Marxists in this country perpetuating a coup d'etat in the streets. And we also had what were appearing to be Republicans and those who were appearing to be Democrats that I believe are commies and socialists at heart. I watched them try to orchestrate a coup d'etat. I would call it a color revolution, using race as a war tool and a tactic to divide and conquer the people. And what we're hearing Vladimir Putin say is that this was an attempt in my country, and I'm not going to allow it to happen. I don't want it to happen. I'm not going to allow it to happen. So, just based off the early information, could it be that, again, Vladimir Putin is not who we've heard he was? Why is he really invading Ukraine? Is it because he wants to be an authoritarian figure? Or is it because he doesn't want blue nation states resting on his borders, being a threat to his border? Could it be? Let's continue.
Then the embassy was running money to them. Our social media was helping them. So this is why we're being such a weenie, I think. All of the people that were involved in that are currently in power here in the United States. All of the people that were doing all these really nasty things are still in the government of the United States. So when Putin just says something that nobody else will pick up, he knows nobody, but the White House will pick up on this. When he says this in an hour-long speech, and it's only a couple of lines, only those who are in trouble because they did those things will recognize it. Ukraine was not brought closer to democracy after the coup d'etat, and the political forces that backed them brought the situation to a deadlock. They pushed Ukraine into a chasm of civil war. That is us.
And that is us. And I think the American people at this point recognize that it's us. I think there are a lot of people watching this broadcast that recognize that that is us. Let me share with you what Survival had to say. Survivor, I'm definitely not pro-Russia, just like I'm not pro-Iran, but these are based red countries. They don't want the liberalism disease that comes with Western society. We all see it here with the woke. My brother, you awake. I couldn't have said it any better myself. It's the truth. I mean, the woke ideology is such a toxic poison that even Xi Jinping has publicly stated, I will not have anything to do with woke politics. We won't have feminine men in our cartoons. And we definitely won't have drag queens coming to our elementary school kids' school and allowing them to be read books about how to be a little girl if you're a little boy. Tua is trash. I'm sorry, but Russians have no reason to be attacking Ukraine. Well, we're going to see about that. Now, let me be clear. I think it's wrong that they're invading Ukraine and people of the Ukrainian country are being harmed that have nothing to do with this war between East and West. But don't be so sure that Vladimir Putin's not willing to take a drastic action to prevent something even more dangerously drastic from taking place. So let's keep watching and keep listening.
So if he goes forward, I hope what he's saying is, I'm only going to do this. But it'll be a bloodbath if I decide to take Ukraine. And guess who's responsible for me saying we have to go save the Ukrainians? And who are we saving them from? The evil Americans. Believe me, if my research team can find all of the dirt on this administration and the Obama administration, you don't think Vladimir Putin can? Now, we've responded with panty waist sanctions. Germany just responded. They're closing the Nord Stream pipeline. And to that, Putin has responded today. I'll give you that in just 60 seconds. Okay, so the Nord Stream pipeline has been canceled by Germany. Yay! And Putin responded by saying, great, Europe, you can expect $2,000 a month energy payments.
Well, let's talk about the Nord Stream pipeline being cut down. You know, Joe Biden closed our pipeline and blamed our energy insufficiency on Donald Trump and Russia. Just thought I'd put that out there. Something to think about. Putin tells Europe, okay, you want to cut down and shut down the pipeline? Well, your energy bill is going to go through the roof. Now, watch what happens as a direct result of the pipeline being shut down and America not being able to buy oil from Russia. Oh, news break, if you didn't know, America has been buying oil from Russia. Just research it. Don't Google it. You won't find it. We already know they're suppressive. They're silencers. They're anti-free speech. And they're anti-information. But anyway, so what do you think is going to happen to oil and gas prices in America, y'all? And if everything that Vladimir Putin says is true and everything that you're about to see is true, then what it looks like is that Joe Biden's trying to cover his ass. The Democratic Party and his administration is trying to cover their ass. Underhanded energy deals done in Ukraine. They're also trying to cover their ass because they know that Russia ain't messing around, man. They don't mind going to war. He called them out in his speech, and I'm going to give you a tidbit of the transcript. Vladimir Putin mentioned several events that took place, and what he's saying is that won't happen here. Just stick around for this. Here we go. Back to Glenn.
That's not going to go well. Well, maybe we can beg Saudi Arabia to send them some more oil or hope that some gas can be channeled out of the butts of cows. We could have helped them, but we can't now because we're not producing it. We were a net exporter just a year ago, a net exporter. But now we have no teeth and we can't help. In fact, this is going to cost us. Here's SOT 2, please. Here's Kamala Harris.
Can you explain to Americans what exactly will they face if this happens?
Sure. As the president talked about in his speech, we are aware that, again, when America stands for her principles,
Oh my gosh,
and all of the things that we hold dear, it requires sometimes for us to put ourselves out there in a way that maybe we will incur some cost. And in this
Such a liar, man. Oh my
situation,
God, I hate this
that
woman.
may relate to energy costs, for example. But we are taking very specific and appropriate, I believe, steps to mitigate what that cost might be if it happens.
Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah, it's gonna cost America's people some hardship. You're gonna go to the gas pump and you're probably gonna pay about $7 a gallon for a gasoline, and it's because Vladimir Putin has chosen this war, and I'm a black woman, and I just want to tell all my black friends back home that we're gonna bring it into Russia. Russia. Donald Trump's Russia. Russia. I'm so sick of her. Like, I can't stand this woman. Oh man, she makes me sick. But anyway, the puppet master herself. So in other words, NATO says, hey, Vladimir, we don't want to really do business with you, okay? We don't like your political ideology, okay? We don't like the fact that you're not willing to allow your people to experience being woke and experience feminism and experience the LGBTQ and experience BLM and experience Antifa and experience the overtake and overthrow of your government. We don't want you to be sovereign. We don't want you to have your freedom. We want you to have our idea of freedom. Our idea of freedom. Westernized freedom. But is it really freedom at all? Is it really freedom at all? Let's continue.
Doing exactly. Well, you have a Democratic congressman. They seem to have really honed in to what the problem is at your gas station, Cut 3.
But the American people need to understand who is making the big profit on the gas.
Yes.
Right now, I would call for Congress, Senate, and House to conduct immediate hearings on the profitability of the oil industry. There is clearly price gouging going on here. They're going to whine and say, oh, it's not us, it's the Saudi Arabians or somebody else. But the profits of those industries have gone through the roof.
But independent of the profits of the companies, Congressman, it is your expectation, and this I should form this as a question, is it your expectation that that gas could go above $5 a gallon in California, considering what we've heard from the White House, that there could be a cost, there will likely be a cost?
Yes, there's likely to be a cost. Exactly what that cost is going to
Shut
be.
up. I can't take it. It is not a price gouging situation. This is a problem that the White House has created by ESG standards. They are not funding anything for fossil fuels. If $5 a gallon for gas in California, mark my words, you're going to pay $5 a gallon for gas all over the country.
All right. Okay. Let's look at this. Let's talk about this. The White House shut down the Keystone Pipeline and made us energy codependent again. I guess that was smart. So we buy oil from Russia and other countries too, which means we're spending money on importing oil when we could have it in our own backyard, which means we're spending more money, which means we go to the gas pumps, Gas costs more money. Neither here nor there, I guess, huh? Right. But let's look at Ukraine needs to join NATO. Two is trash. I think NATO is a little bit of a mystery corporation. I don't think they're a corporation. They're something. A coalition. I think before the night's over, we might have a different opinion about NATO and what its ultimate goal is also. But I'll keep that comment in mind. Thanks for sharing that. Let's get to the end of Glenn Beck's dissertation. And I hope you paid attention. Making a lot of sense. And we're going to come back and take another angle because I don't think that Glenn has it all. And I think he's a little off. But he does have some good information. And we're just going to try to add to it.
It may not happen tomorrow. And it may not happen just because of Russia. But guarantee you will pay $5 a gallon of gas until Joe Biden and the financial community takes its foot off the throat of fossil fuel manufacturers.
And I was in California, a week and a half ago, and I saw $5 a gallon gas. It's already there. It's already there. So without this war, without all of these other things piling up on top of each other, so if you don't think $5 a gallon gas is coming, especially in California, I mean, it's already present.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. So Vladimir Putin is taking, advice from a weird kind of apocalyptic philosopher in Russia. And the American government, in the name of democracy, is making an attempt to impose its will on Russia and lay a foothold, a military foothold, a NATO foothold / an American foothold, and right in the backyard of Russia. Things are seeming to take a different type of shape here. Is Vladimir Putin really an authoritarian monster who just wants to conquer the land for Russia? And he's saying, hey, I am Russian. Well, what is that pussy? We want to take over the world like Hitler. I mean, could it be that there's something else behind the narrative? I mean, at this point, I guess we can conclude we can't trust what our media outlets are telling us, man. We can't believe anything they're saying. I mean, I don't believe nothing they're saying. Been lying for who knows how many years. I know for a fact, at least the last 6 years. So no, I'm not taking mainstream media's, storyline on Russia, Ukraine. It's a known fact. Vladimir Putin's been telling NATO, stop expanding toward my borders for at least 8 years. And now we know they haven't listened. So, I'm with you on that, Survival. I wonder why. I don't know either. Survival says, besides the Democrats and the deep state, I don't see why U.S. has so much interest in Ukraine. My brother, I want you to keep that question close to you. And put it in the chat again, and you'll know when. Trust me. And if you don't, I'll tell you. Here's Joker. Joker said, all right, real Greg Kelly, the real question is, why does the Democrats and Biden, why are they so against what Putin is doing? What do they have to lose in Ukraine? Oh, God. I tell you, that's why I like this community right here. Y'all smart. Y'all not just listening to what everybody say. Y'all paying attention. That's what I'm talking about. All right. So part 2 of this, in this next segment, we're going to get into some very, very interesting information that's going to hopefully answer some of the questions that Joker and Survival and some of you others who haven't put anything in the chat, some questions you might have, because it just don't make sense listening to the Biden administration's excuses to why Russia is going to invade Ukraine and take the Ukrainian people that killed him and slaughtered him because he's an authoritarian. It just don't make sense. Stick with me. And once again, you're watching the Real Greg Kelly Show, and I will be back after Dementia Joe.
Alzheimer's is a progressive disease where symptoms gradually worsen over a number of years. In its early stages, memory loss is mild. As the disease progresses, individuals may begin to have problems with their activities of daily living. They may also get lost, have trouble paying bills, and repeat questions.
What's happening?
In addition, they might have mood and personality changes and become withdrawn. They may also lose the ability to carry on a conversation and respond to their environment.
Eventually, they will no longer be able to function in society and must be placed in a nursing home.
Let's go, Brandon. I agree.
We just provide compassion and caring, loving atmosphere.
The access is 24 hours, and I have easy access to him. I'm able to come at night or during the day.
As the disease progresses, we sometimes recommend a frontal lobotomy.
And they literally had to take the top of my head off. I mean, they take a saw and they cut your head off.
Common side effects may include memory loss and confusion.
Where am I? I'm right here.
Other side effects might include incoherent talk or saying things you probably shouldn't have.
I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun.
If you'd like to make a call, please hang up and try again. If you need help, hang up and then dial your operator.
But the whole point of this is that we can do a lot to deal with endangered species. True international effort to pressure. That's a stupid way to say it.
You know, Donald Trump was asked
on... Sorry.
When you're at home trying to take care of a loved one with dementia, it gets more challenging by the day. Eventually, the time will come when you need to make that difficult decision. When that time comes, be sure to choose a nursing home that'll wipe his ass.
Thank you all for listening. Oh. Thanks. Okay.
Joe.
You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. Come on, man.
Come on, man. Yeah. Welcome back to the Real Greg Color Show. Hope you enjoyed that commercial. Dementia Joe. That's our president. Isn't he sweet? He's like a little baby. He's so sweet, so sugary. Hair sniffing fool. Anyway, whew, man. It's getting hot in here, y'all. All right. I'm going to talk about this just for a brief moment. Missiles. Just check this out now. Clip 2.
You have talked a lot about security guarantees, and now we've seen your proposals. You also say you have no intention of invading Ukraine. So will you guarantee unconditionally that you will not invade Ukraine or any other sovereign country? Or does that depend on how negotiations go? And another question, what is it, do you think, that the West does not understand about Russia or about your intentions? Thank you.
Speaking of the security guarantees and what it will depend upon, or if something will depend upon the negotiations, our actions will not depend on the negotiation. They will depend on the unconditional compliance with the Russian security demands today and in the historical context. In this sense, we have made it clear that any further NATO movement to the east is unacceptable. There is nothing unclear about this. We are not deploying our missiles over at the borders of the US. No. On the other hand, the US is deploying its missiles close to our home, on the porch of our house. So, are we demanding something excessive? We're simply asking them not to deploy their attack systems over at our home. What is so unusual or peculiar about that?
That's a good question. That's a real good question. So again, I done messed up this thing, but anyway, if what he's saying is true, then America is forcing this brother to do something that he doesn't even deem necessary, which is cover the bases of Russian territory. I want to protect my own country. Is there anything wrong with that? Is anything wrong with that? Is there something wrong with defending yourself? If there's something wrong with defending yourself, defending your people, would you do the same? Would you do the same? Would you protect your people? Let's see what else he has to say.
So what would the Americans think if we, for example, decided to come to the border between, say, Canada and the United States or Mexico and simply deploy our missiles over there? Well, did Mexico and the US never have any territorial disputes? What about California? What about Texas? Did you forget about that? But everything seems to have calmed down. Nobody remembers those things, just like the way they remember about Crimea. We try not to remember the situation in Ukraine. Who created that? Who started the crisis? Was that Lenin? Yes, when he declared the Soviet Union in 1922 and then the Constitution of 1924 following his death, was following the principles of Lenin. This is a matter of security, not just history. This is about security. It is not the negotiations that matter. It is the outcome, the result. I've reiterated this many times, and you're well aware that we said not an inch to the east. That was the NATO guarantee in 1990. So what became of that? They fooled us.
All right, so that's what became of it. I think what Vladimir is saying is that we've had discussions with NATO. We don't want NATO expanding in our backyard. We don't want these blue nation states, these democratic nation states in our backyard. Why? It makes a lot of sense when you think about it. I think Vladimir Putin knows very well who he's dealing with when it comes to American politics and politicians and their policies. I think he has a very good idea of what's in store for him if these blue nation states get a military foothold in Ukraine. He says it's about security. I don't want these hostile forces at my border. And I get it. I do. I think we can think back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. I don't think America wanted missiles from Cuba pointed 90 miles off the coast of America. We didn't like that. I think we can understand why Putin doesn't want this. Again, I don't agree with the actions he's taken. But if you think that there are multiple nations that could eventually come firing missiles at your house, and they're right next door, do you take a drastic measure? Do you say, okay, you want to bring new Ukraine into NATO, which will give you a clear path to my country? I tell you what, this is what I think he's saying. I tell you what, I'll take Ukraine. And if you want Ukraine, you have to come through Russia. And if you're willing to come through Russia, okay, you can have it, but it won't be easy. I think that's what he's saying. What do you think? Put it in the chat for me.
We've seen 5 waves of NATO expansion. Now they're in Romania and in Poland, and they're deploying the relevant attack systems over there. That's what we're talking about. You should finally understand, we're not threatening anyone. We did not come to the US borders or to the UK borders. No, they came to our borders, and now they're saying that Ukraine will also join NATO and they will deploy their systems there.
Am I making a clear point to you what he's saying? I think you can hear what he's saying as the translator delivers to us the words of Vladimir Putin. And if you're paying attention to what he's saying, I think what he's simply saying is, I know that NATO and the allies of the West, including the United States, have a disdain for me and my people. And I know that they want to bring their missile systems to my border. And I've talked to NATO and said, no more expansion to the east. But they won't listen. You got an enemy at your back door, knocking. Sooner or later, he going to blow the doorknob off. He coming in. And you're at home and you know they're there. What do you do? America, what do you do, Americans? Do you defend your territory, or defend your home, defend your people, your children? Or do you just let the enemy, or who you perceive as the enemy, to walk right in? These are good questions you should ask ourselves.
Or not just NATO, they will simply deploy it on a bilateral basis. They will deploy their military bases and their attack systems. That's what we're talking about. And you keep demanding some guarantees from us. You must give us the guarantees. It is up to you, and you must do this immediately, right now, instead of keep talking about this for decades. And use this small talk and soft talk about the need for guarantees of security for everyone. This is exactly what we mean. We are not threatening anybody. And now to the second part of your question. Could you repeat that, please?
What is it that you think that the West does not understand about Russia or about your intentions?
No, знаете что?
Yes, exactly. Well, you know, what you understand or what you don't understand, sometimes it seems to me that we live in two different worlds. I was speaking about very obvious things. How can you not understand that? You say you will not expand, and then you keep expanding. You say we will have equal guarantees for everyone on a number of international agreements, and then we see there is no equality or no equal security. See, here's the thing. Back in 1918, one of the assistants of Woodrow Wilson, the US president, said that the whole world would feel calmer and safer if today's enormous Russia would be replaced with the states of Siberia and 4 more states in the European part of Russia. That was set in 1918, and in 1991 we separated into 12 separate parts. It seems to me that our partners were not satisfied with that. They think that Russia is a tad too large. Even the European countries have turned themselves into a union of states. They are quite small states with populations of 60 to 80 million people, but even after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, we only had 146 million people, and that is too much for the West. I think that is the only explanation for their constant pressure against us.
It's constant pressure. Again, I don't know if this is true. I'm just listening to what Putin says, and I'm listening to what Biden has said and what the Biden administration has said. And all I'm saying here, America, is if Vladimir Putin is a terrorist, or if he is an authoritarian, which I think is still a terrorist, I mean, that's what I believe. But if what he's saying is true, and I do know for a fact that Vladimir Putin has been in the halls of NATO having conversations about his concerns of NATO's expansion eastward toward Russian borders. This has been on the table since 2012. He came into power in 2000, May 7th to be exact. But he's having a conversation with NATO, and he's been having conversations with Joe Biden's administration. Something was really good between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and everybody wants to connect it to the election. But what I'm finding out as I studied this, it looks like Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump and Xi Jinping are all anti-woke. That doesn't look good for us if that's true. I mean, a lot of people aren't looking at it from this perspective. And again, I'm just a guy trying to give you a different perspective. I'm just looking at it from this perspective. Not saying it's right. So, I mean, there'll be some that think that Putin wants to impose his will simply because he looks at the West and he sees a weak Joe Biden, and here we go. And it kind of looks that way because when Barack Obama was in office, he invaded. Trump, nah. Biden, yeah, I'm invade again. It could be that, but it could be something more, that maybe Biden and Obama were trying to force him to do something or force him into a situation the way he has no choice. And Vladimir Putin is saying that. He's saying, what choice were we given when we've asked NATO to not expand their borders toward east, which is Russian border? Because as soon as they do that, they start deploying missile defense systems. They aim missiles at Russia. He's saying, I don't trust the American way. I don't trust the NATO way. And in his speech on the 24th, he tells you why he doesn't trust the American way. He doesn't trust NATO because NATO has 80% of the Americans, America's troops, and 80% of the budget comes out of America, which means that the greatest military influence in NATO is America. And he just sees something that he deems to be a threat to his people. Again, I don't know exactly, how that all works out. I don't know how it all plays out. Where'd that thing go? Here we go. All I'm saying to you is that maybe we're not getting the full truth. And if you think that not getting the full truth is impossible in this country via the mainstream media outlets, you're blind. You just don't know. You're just out seeing that these people lie all the time. And so I'm just more directed to look in another direction than the direction that I'm being steered in, watching Fox News, CNN, ABC, MSNBC. I'm just not sure I can take what they say as true. And me personally, I don't think we're hearing enough from Vladimir Putin, but evidently the brother's having conversations with people publicly. News outlets are capturing it, but we're not seeing it. We're not seeing it at all. And I think there's a reason we don't see it. Let's continue with this.
In the 1990s, the Soviet Union did everything it could to build normal relations with the West, with the United States. I will keep saying this, and I will repeat for your viewers and listeners out there from the media that you represent. I didn't quite get that, but that doesn't matter. Our nuclear sites, our military nuclear sites, had experts from the US intelligence authorities. They were going there. That was their job, to visit the Russian military nuclear sites. They spent their whole days over there. And the Russian government had advisors from the CIA working inside of it. What else did you need? Why did you have to support the terrorists in Northern Caucasus and use the terrorist organizations to reach your goals and break down the Russian Federation? This was exactly what you were doing. And as a former director of the FSB, I know that. We were working with the double agents, and they were reporting to us on the tasks of the Western intelligence agencies. Why did you have to do that? You should have done something different, perhaps treat Russia as a possible ally and strengthen trust. But no, instead you tried to keep breaking us up. And then you started the NATO expansion to the east. We were saying, don't do that. You had promised you wouldn't. And they say, where is it put in written form? Nowhere. Well, then F off, and we don't care about your concerns. And every time we kept responding and trying to make obstacles, we were expressing our concerns about that. But they say no. So you can do whatever you want about your concerns. We will do whatever we need. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We witnessed 5 waves of NATO expansion. Why can't they understand? What is unclear? I believe everything is clear. We are thinking about our own security.
Okay. I just believe in being able to see from both sides. I heard a lot from CNN. I heard a lot from Fox News. I wanted to hear from Vladimir Putin. I wanted you to hear from Vladimir Putin. What do you say is going on? What do you think about Western influence in Ukraine? Now, do I believe that Russia has a right to overthrow a sovereign nation? No, I don't. But I believe in the close ties of the Russians and the Ukrainians. I do. I know this is true. I have friends there. met some really good people from the country. But if you're Putin, I mean, we're just speaking hypothetically. We're not going to take anybody's word. I prefer we all do our own homework. I'm just giving you, from my perspective, or from Putin's perspective, what he has to say about Joe Biden saying Putin chose this war. But did he for real choose this war? Putin is an authoritarian who just wants to take, these nations back for the glory and honor of Russia, the Russia of old, the unmodeled Russia. Is that true? Or is what Vladimir Putin is saying is true? I've been having conversation with the NATO people, and I tell them, no more progress to the east. I do not want your missile systems under my border. If you do that, I declare war. I do not care who you are. I do not care how many of it you are. I mean, could it be that Vladimir Putin is standing up to some sort of bully? Some sort of bully, perhaps. Again, surrounded by blue. If you look behind me, you'll see this map. There's a lot of countries facing this red nation. And what Putin is saying is that Spain, France, and Germany, and Poland, Romania, Turkey, all of these surrounding countries, the UK, are controlled by the United States. They're part of an alliance, a military alliance led by the United States. So in essence, what he's saying is, you're making an attempt to not only surround me, but to penetrate me. And I will not allow it. I'm willing to take and invade a sovereign nation to keep you off my doorstep. I just want you to think about it. I'm not saying it's true. I want you to decide if it's true. I'm just giving the information. Don't get mad at me. This is the Real Greg Kelly Show. I'm the Real Greg Kelly. There's some strange things happening. I'm just not sure that we have a clear perception of what they are. And I want to be able to get it clear. All right, I'll be right back with you. We're going to go into our third segment. Once again, you're watching the Real Greg Kelly Show. Thank you, everybody. Ranger, Backyard Politics. I see you, brother. Survival. Man, I love your insight. Even Tua, your insight's great, man. Keep putting it out there. Keep putting it in the chat. I'm loving them. I'm reading them. I saw Brooke. Thanks for being here. Everybody else, Nana, I don't know if you're still watching, but I hope you're enjoying this. I hope you're getting something out of it. Maybe it'll inspire somebody to go do a little bit of digging. Yes. The fourth empire. Well, the fourth political party. You need to look at that. This is the Real Greg Kelly Show. I'll be right back. Check out Justin Trudeau, y'all.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know that following the science and stepping up to protect each other is the best way to continue to ensure our freedoms, our rights, our values as a country. We are not intimidated by those who hurl insults and abuse at small business workers and steal food from the homeless. We won't give in to those who fly racist flags. We won't cave to those who engage in vandalism or dishonor the memory of our veterans. So to those responsible for this behavior, it needs to stop. There's a level of admiration I actually have for China because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say, we need to go green as fast as we need to start, investing in solar. I mean, there is a flexibility that I know Stephen Harper must dream about of having a dictatorship that he could do everything he wanted. That I find quite interesting.
Regardless of the fact that we are attacking
your fundamental rights or limiting your fundamental rights, and the Charter says that's wrong, we're still going to go ahead and do it. The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations.
We went after the funding. Our efforts combined with the city's efforts eliminated the GoFundMe. $10 million are no longer accessible to the demonstrators. There are other funding avenues that we continue to aggressively go after through intelligence, information, coordination with financial institutions, and all three levels of government.
We are broadening the scope of Canada's anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules so that they cover crowdfunding platforms and the payment service providers they use.
We will be relentless in pursuing the funding that has enabled this demonstration to continue to this point.
These changes cover all forms of transactions, including digital assets, such as cryptocurrencies.
I want to be very clear. The scope of these measures will be time-limited, geographically targeted, as well as reasonable and proportionate to the threats they are meant to address. The Emergencies Act will be used to strengthen and support law enforcement agencies at all levels across the country. This is about keeping Canadians safe, protecting people's jobs, and restoring confidence in our institutions.
As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order.
Justin Trudeau, I mean, I thought he was kind of a cool guy. And I started to read what he said. This is a couple of weeks ago. He was, or maybe this is September, but he was talking about people who are not vaccinated. He said they don't believe in science. They're often misogynistic, often racist. No, they're not.
That was not smart of him at all.
Right. He said, but they take up space. And with that, we have to make a choice in terms of a leader as a country. Do we tolerate these people? It's like, tolerate them. Now you do sound like Hitler.
Do we tolerate these people? I mean, I want you guys to take a real good look. I want you to know that Canada is a part of NATO. Canada claims to be a democracy. Canada claims to be for the rights of the people. Same thing Hitler did. But if you pay attention to what this fool is doing to the Canadian people, I'm telling you, America, it will be here before you know it. Could this be what Vladimir Putin is willing to go all out to defend against? Could it be? It is something to think about. It really is something to think about. Could this be the reason that he won't allow the Klaus Schwabs and the George Soros of the world, George Soroses of the world, the Bill Clintons, the Barack Obamas, even the Joe Bidens of the world, to bring a democratic philosophy and government to his borders? I mean, did that sound like a man that loves freedom or cares about the people of his nation? He sounded like a dictator. He sounded like a dictator. This is what Joe Biden wants to bring to America. This is the end game. And once this Russian-Ukrainian conflict spirals out of control, it's going to be hell on earth here. The distribution of goods, the acquisition of fossil fuel. It's not fossil fuel. I mean, I think that's been debunked. Just your basic human rights violated at the hands of the government. All right, let's get into our last clip here. Vladimir Putin, a little history behind what's really taking place. Again, I want you to decide what this is about. I want you to tell me. I don't want to tell you. I don't want you to take my ideas and say, oh, that's true. I want you to draw your own conclusions. And if you want to come up on the show and share your ideas, the number is right there. Yeah, right there. 562-542-3185 at The Real Greg Kelly Show. Whew, man, this is getting heavy. It's getting kind of heavy. Just a little bit. However, we're going to go into this next segment here. Put your comments in the chat. I'll answer as many of them as I can. Anglo Conservative, I see you, brother. Joker, let me tell y'all what Joker said, and I'm going to tell you what AC said. The media lies. We need to have a media that reports the truth and not lies. Can we get an amen? Can we get an amen? Is it Canada under the crown? I'm not sure. I think so. Somebody look that up for me. Put it in the chat. We want to know. We don't want to speculate here. We just want to get the facts. There's a number at the bottom. If you want to call in, you have something to say, you want to share your ideas, the hotline is wide open. Let's get into this. The real Vladimir Putin, the real story behind this invasion into Ukraine.
Will Russia go to war with Ukraine? All week, you've heard numerous answers to this question. In Ukraine, 71% of the people believe their country is already at war with Russia. This is a complex crisis, and all the answers are hidden in history. Did you know there was a time when Kiev was more powerful than Moscow? There was also a time when Ukraine and America were adversaries. Tonight, we'll bring you all these stories. We will tell you why Russian President Vladimir Putin is obsessed with Ukraine. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay, and this is Gravitas Plus. We begin in the 9th century. There was a state called Kievian Rus. This is where it was located. The Slavic people lived here. The city of Kiev was their capital. Between 980 and 1015, the Kievan Rus was ruled by Grand Prince Volodymyr. In Russian, his name is Vladimir. In Ukrainian, Volodymyr. And as fate would have it, these are also the names of the presidents of these two countries today. Anyway, Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians draw their lineage from this Slavic state. A lot changed in the centuries that followed, and for a lot of it, Ukraine was under Russian rule. In the 1900s, the two were Soviet republics. Russia, the most powerful of the 15 republics, and Ukraine, the second most powerful. It had defense industries, large agricultural lands, and housed much of the Soviet nuclear arsenal. During the Cold War, Ukraine was the arch rival of the United States. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Ukraine became independent, as did Russia. Ukraine inherited much of Soviet nuclear arsenal, but gave it up to Russia in 1994. In exchange, Moscow guaranteed Ukraine's security and promised to respect its sovereignty. They signed the Budapest Memorandum along with these countries. Cut to November 2013, Viktor Yanukovych was the president of Ukraine. He had a reputation for heavy-handedness, corruption, and above all, for being openly pro-Moscow. In 2013, he rejected an EU trade deal. This deal could have meant greater integration with the European Union. Instead, Yanukovych decided to take a $15 billion bailout from Russia.
Okay, so this brother didn't want nothing to do with the European Union. I understand that. I get it. I do. Want to remain independent. Sound like America to me. And note that Russia wasn't going around trying to spread its propaganda and spread its wings, so to speak. They already had their empire established. Oh, but the great democratic America that's not really democratic. Boy, do we love to take other people's territory and make it our own. Let's continue.
Many Ukrainians, it felt like being sold to Moscow. So protests broke out. They were called Euromaidan. Euro, because these protests were about Europe, and Maidan because they happened in Kiev's Maidan, what we today know as the Independence Square. Here, protesters chanted, "Sign the EU deal."
Okay, does that look familiar? That kind of looked like a January 6th right there, don't it, y'all? I wonder where they got that idea from. Remember, Glenn Beck said that during the Obama administration, we were training Ukrainians how to do a coup d'etat. We saw a coup d'etat here in America, did we not? Did we not have the summer of love? Did we not? Did we not witness riots and violence in the streets? We witnessed it in 2016 during, the inauguration of Donald Trump. Death threats, people want to kill the man, people protesting. It wasn't a January 6th deal. So they said, but didn't they storm Congress? I showed you that in a previous video, a previous live stream. But all this seems to be okay. But this was taking place in Ukraine? Man, where did they get that from? It just makes you question stuff. Makes you question the narrative that we're hearing. Let's continue.
Yanukovych must step down. Russia supported the president. The West supported the protesters. In February 2014, Yanukovych's government was toppled. The president was driven out of Ukraine. He fled to Russia. Not every Ukrainian was happy with this. Many in the Russian-speaking East wanted Yanukovych to stay. When he was driven out, the minority felt disenfranchised. On the other side of the border, Russia was angry it had lost its puppet. To salvage the situation, Moscow annexed Crimea. Why Crimea? Well, let's now zoom into this part of the world. Crimea is a peninsula. It is located in the Black Sea. In 1954, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev transferred Crimea. It was given to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic from the Russian Soviet Socialist Republic. Why? Khrushchev hoped the transfer would strengthen, quote-unquote, brotherly ties between the Ukrainian and Russian people. Both Russia and Crimea were part of the Soviet Union. So this transfer did not mean very much. When Ukraine became independent in 1991, Crimea joined it. The peninsula was given special autonomy. It remained home to Russian military bases. Moscow promised to respect Crimean autonomy. Many in Russia were of the opinion that Crimea should not have been allowed to join Ukraine. In 2014, when Yanukovych was ousted from power in Ukraine, Russian military began seizing government buildings in Crimea. Soon the entire peninsula was under military occupation. A referendum followed. On the 16th of March 2014, Crimeans voted to become a part of Russia. Was this vote legitimate? Well, it depends on who you ask. For Putin, this was Crimea's liberation. For the rest of the world, this was Crimea's annexation.
Okay, so the American government didn't like what Putin did, but we do it all the time. We do it all the time. We do it a lot. We don't do it all the time. We do it a lot. A lot. We do. So they call it an annexing. Putin says we're going to free Crimea. We don't want Crimea under the influence of Western ideology. I mean, it's just interesting to me. Very, very interesting that we don't hear this on mainstream media. We don't hear about the in-depth history of, we're just going to call it the authoritarian himself, Vladimir Putin. We don't hear a whole lot about Putin and what his ideals are. We don't hear a lot about that. We don't hear a ton about it. At least not over here. But again, I want you to think is Putin what Joe Biden and his administration says that he is? Is he that? Or is this another case of, the American people being lied to by mainstream media? Okay, let's finish this out. But this, again, I just want you to think, America. Just want you to think. That's all I want. Not trying to convince you anything. Just want you to listen. Check it out.
The focus then shifted to eastern Ukraine, where Russia-backed separatists had seized territory. Ukrainian forces did not launch an all-out offensive at first, but on the 17th of July 2014, when a flight carrying 298 people was shot down by these rebels, Ukrainian forces decided to flush out the rebels. The separatists began losing ground, so the Russian army stepped in. They invaded eastern Ukraine and fought alongside the rebels. What followed was a series of talks between Russia, Ukraine, and the West. They resulted in the Minsk Accords. This was first signed in 2014. Both sides agreed on ceasefire and military withdrawal. Ukraine agreed to hold elections in the rebel-held areas. 8 years on, the Minsk Accords remain unimplemented. Ukraine stands as the largest European country excluding Russia. It covers an area of more than 600,000 square kilometers with a population of 44 million and a GDP of more than $155 billion.
Okay. All right. Things are starting to come into perspective. Why does NATO want Ukraine? We're not hearing anything about that in the news. Why does NATO and America and their allies, why do they want this country? Look at that. 603,550 square kilometers, 44 million people, GDP, 1.55.6 billion. Okay, we have a caller. Give me 1 second here. All right, you're on there.
Call
This
from-
is here we go.
Survival. To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
All right, you're on live, Survival. This is Greg Kelly, man. What's going on? Talk to me.
Hey, what's up, man? This is Survival.
What's going on, brother? What you got, man?
Oh, I gotta mute my YouTube. So what point were we at? I had a little issue there trying to call, so I missed a couple of minutes. I don't know. I think I guess the question I would want to ask you, or maybe not a question, but I think we'd be on the same side with this, but the mainstream media isn't really showing a lot about some of these neo-Nazi organizations in Ukraine that supposedly the Democrats have been funding for years now. I don't think that's been public information. And it was news to me when I finally found it that I don't support Nazis at all, ever. I never have. I know you never have. You know, we're American guys. But for whatever reason, the Democrats have been really funding these guys over there that have very far right, very far right standpoints. You know, do you know anything about that?
Well, I mean, what I've heard about the Nazi regime inside of the borders of Ukraine, it's pretty much that over the years, I mean, going back to World War II, that a lot of the Germans party, they moved into Russia and into the Ukrainian area, and they pretty much went underground. And then, you know, we saw some of those same scientists of old get captured and be brought to America. Also, different ideals, but you know, I think the end game for both of those parties, the Fascist Party and the Democratic Party, the end game was the same, was to take over the world. And we're witnessing that, which is why NATO was formed. However, I have no inside football about, you know, the actual party and the strength of its existence in Ukraine. But I have heard, you know, snippets here, snippets there, that they do exist and that they're pretty much running underground campaigns to overthrow the Russian government and infiltrate Ukraine with Western ideology under the guise of democracy. I think that's really true. And I think that's what Putin is willing to, you know, just go all out to defend. I don't think he wants that in his country. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't want to keep you. I don't want to be a long time caller or anything, but I think that's what really I get confused about this conflict with Russia and Ukraine, because one side is pretty hard red, you know, a very solid right wing in a sense, and then Ukraine. What I'm seeing from what the Americans have been, what we've been funding, seems to be very solid right too. So I don't know exactly what the conflict is, you know. I don't know. I'm kind of confused with it, to be honest, for a lot of it.
Yeah, it seems to be a pretty complicated scenario. Again, I'm just putting another side of it, a side that we don't get to see on mainstream media, which is Putin actually telling you, this is why I'm taking this type of decisive action versus what we hear, you know, from the Biden administration. And I'm with you, man. I'm a little lost of words and, you know, perspective. But one thing I do know historically about the shadow government, the deep state, is that they operate on the level of tyranny. You know, it's just so interesting when certain leaders are in power. America seems to always be in conquest in the name of democracy and the liberation of a slave race. But, you know, when you go and you listen.
I think I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. You're breaking up just a little bit on my end, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what I'm left thinking is, why are Americans interested in Ukraine? You know, I don't know why we're so concerned with them when we have our own problems here. And with that, you know, I'm gonna end the call. But thanks for having me call.
Hey, well, thanks for calling in, Survivor,
Appreciate it,
man.
man.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you. All right, interesting perspective. Again, that's all we can try to do is get perspective, because again, we can't trust mainstream media. Let's get back to this young lady, giving us a little history. But look at this GDP here at 1.55.6 billion and per capita income at $3,727. If you know anything about, the Democratic war machine, likes to seek out nations that are high value resources, high population, and, vulnerable, so to speak, or at least hungry for what they see in the West. We see prosperity, we see enterprise, we see big time money importing and exporting goods. We want to boom as an economy. We want to generate revenue. We don't want to be under the rule of anybody that suppresses us. I get it. But something a lot more comes along with joining NATO and, adopting what I even hate to say it, American democracy, because again, what we're seeing now is not American democracy. That's just not it. But this is what they call it, American democracy. Sometimes you can get in over your head. The love of money is the root of all evil. Let's continue.
Per capita income, more than $3,700. Today, Ukraine is divided between East and West in more ways than one. The West sees itself as more European. The East is closer to Russia, be it in terms of geography or sentiment. In the West, most Ukrainians speak Ukrainian. In the East, a third are native Russians. In the West, Russia is looked at with suspicion. In the East, Russia is looked at through the lens of shared history and heritage. Ukraine also remains at war. Its forces are fighting the rebels in the east. Rebel leaders are ruling at least two regions, Donetsk and Luhansk. Together, they're known as the Donbas region. Russia has once again sent its troops. This time, they're stationed right at the border. What does Vladimir Putin want? For NATO to stop expanding. NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's a military alliance. These countries are the founding members of NATO. These countries joined it during the Cold War, and these countries joined after it. Ukraine wants to join NATO too, but Putin wants NATO to exclude Ukraine and every former Soviet state.
He wants to be excluded. He wants no part of NATO on his border. I think I understand that. It's quite trivial in the sense that, like, what's the problem? Like, why can't NATO be at your border? He doesn't trust NATO at all. He doesn't trust NATO. I'm not sure that I would either. I'm not sure that I would either. I'm going to read to you a few parts of Vladimir Putin's address to Russia and to Ukraine. I think it's interesting. Bear with me. I hate reading, but I'm going to do it for you because y'all my friends. Let me start with what I said in my address on February the 21st this year. We are talking about what causes us particular concern and anxiety about the fundamental threats that year after year, step by step, are rudely and unceremoniously created by impossible politicians. Impossible. In other words, they can't be negotiated with. Politicians in the West in relation to our country. I mean, the expansion of the NATO bloc to the east, bringing its military infrastructure closer to Russian borders. It is well known that for 30 years, we have persistently and patiently tried to reach an agreement with the leading NATO countries on the principles of equal, indivisible security in Europe. In response to our proposals, we constantly faced either cynical deception and lies or attempts to pressure and blackmail, while the North Atlantic Alliance, in the meantime, despite all our protests and concerns, it is steadily expanding. The military machine is moving, and I repeat, it's coming close to our borders. Why is it all this happening? Where does this impudent manner of speaking from the positions of one's own exclusivity, infallibility, and permissiveness come from? Where does the disdainful attitude towards our interests and absolutely legitimate demands come from? The answer is clear. Everything is clear and obvious. The Soviet Union in the late 80s of the last century weakened and then completely collapsed. The whole course of events that took place then is a good lesson for us today as well, and convincingly shows that the paralysis of power and will is the first step towards complete degradation and oblivion. As soon as we lost confidence in ourselves for some time, and that it is, the balance of power in the world turned and was disturbed. This has led to the fact that the previous treaties and agreements are no longer in effect. Persuasion and request do not help. Everything that does not suit those who are in power is declared archaic, obsolete, unnecessary, and vice versa. Everything that seems beneficial to them is presented as the ultimate truth, pushed through at any cost, boorishly, and by any means. Any dissenters are broken through in their knees. Now, this is just the first segment of the speech. I'm just wondering again, my question has always been, is Putin who America says he is? And just by listening to what is being said here in this speech, and I have a few more segments or paragraphs that I want to share, it seems like he has a grave concern about the presence of NATO military forces. And again, NATO is a military alliance. It is a military alliance. Now, if you know what's been happening here in America in relationship to what the mainstream media has been telling us about Russia, is that Russia is hostile to America. Russia interfered with our elections. Russia is the greatest threat to American sovereignty. And I'm just not sure that's the truth. If I'm listening to Putin, it sounds like America is the greatest threat to Russian sovereignty. And we're talking about America that is not per se the American people, but if you know the level of participation that America plays and the part that it plays in NATO, over 80% of NATO's troops are American troops. Over 80% of NATO's funding comes from America. It was President Trump that told NATO that it needed to carry its own weight financially because America was footing too much of the bill. And they began to pay more. Donald Trump took that stance because it's not the responsibility of America for America to take care of all of the world's issues and neglect the greater needs of the American people here at home. But I think it's by design if you include the threat of the Great Reset. I'm just thinking that at some point we have to see that we're deliberately being sabotaged as a nation so that we can become a greater part, a greater participant in the global world, the global governance system, the new world order. We can't continue to think that the supply chains are breaking down because something is fundamentally wrong in America because of America or because of Americans. It's time that we take, a step back and realize that our American government is no longer the same. We've been infiltrated by a socialist regime. The enemies of our country are now at the helm of leadership in our country. I think it's about time that we realize the truth, America. We've been being lied to about foreign affairs for a very long time in this country. The time is now to wake up and see the reality of this thing. The reality is we've been lied to. I believe the reason America can't take decisive action militarily is because Vladimir Putin holds the key to expose many of the hidden secrets and the underhanded dealings, politically, financially, and on an energy basis. He can expose it all. And I think that he knows and he believes in his heart that if Ukraine were to enter into an agreement with NATO, that by default, because of their democratic position and their promise of a brighter future, following the ways of Western society, that they will by default become the enemy of Russia and that they will partner with NATO forces and take partnership with Russia's greatest enemy, Western culture, Western democracy. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure that Vladimir Putin is not being pushed into a corner and that he's vowed to defend his nation and his people at all costs. Again, just something to think about. Just something that we can all pause for the cause and think about. I'm just not sure that Putin is who America says that he is. He goes on to start speaking about, in his speech, some of the unjust invasions and the violations of international law. And I'm going to pick up in the 4th paragraph of the speech. I read and quote, "You don't have to look far for examples. First, without any sanctions from the from the UN Security Council, they, the West, carried out a bloody military operation against Belgrade, using aircraft and missiles right in the very center of Europe. Several weeks of continuous bombing on civilian cities, on life-supporting infrastructure. We have to remind you of these facts. Otherwise, some Western colleagues do not like to remember those events. And when we talk about it, they prefer to point not to the norms of international law, but to the circumstances that they interpret as they see fit to justify these breaches of international law. Then came the turn of Iraq, Libya, Syria, the illegitimate use of military force against Libya, the perversion of all decisions in the UN Security Council on Libyan issues led to the complete destruction of the state, to the emergence of huge hotbeds of international terrorism, to the fact that the country plunged into a humanitarian catastrophe that has not stopped for many years. Even civil war, the tragedy which doomed hundreds of thousands, millions of people, not only in Libya, but through this region. It gave rise to a massive migration exodus from North Africa and the Middle East into Europe. A similar fate was prepared for Syria. The fighting of the Western coalition on the territory of this country without the consent of the Syrian government and the sanction of the UN Security Council is nothing but aggression and intervention. However, a special place in this series is occupied, of course, by the invasion of Iraq, also without any legal grounds. As a pretext, they chose reliable information allegedly available to the United States about the presence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. As proof of this, publicly, in front of the eyes of the whole world, the U.S. Secretary of State shook some kind of test tube with white powder, assuring everyone that this was the chemical weapon being developed in Iraq. And then it turned out that all of this was a hoax, a bluff. There were no chemical weapons in Iraq. Unbelievable, surprising, but the facts remain. They were lies at the highest state level and from high rostrum in the UN. And as a result, huge casualties, destruction, and an incredible surge of terrorism. In general, one gets the impression that particularly everywhere in many regions of the world where the West come to establish its own order, the result is bloody, unhealed wounds, ulcers of international terrorism and extremism. All that I have said is the most egregious, but by no means the only examples of disregard for international law. In this series, and promises of our country not to expand NATO by 1 inch to the east, I repeat, they deceived me. But in popular terms, they simply threw it away. Yes, you can often hear that politics is a dirty business, perhaps, but not to the same extent. Not to the same extent, after all. Such cheating behavior contradicts not only the principles of international relations, but above all, the generally recognized norms of morality. Where is justice and truth here? Just a bunch of lies and hypocrisy. A bunch of lies and hypocrisy. Man, this sounds so familiar. As for our country, after the collapse of the USSR, with all this unprecedented openness of the new modern Russia, the readiness to work honestly with the United States and other Western partners, and in the coalition of virtually unilateral disarmament, they immediately tried to squeeze us, finish off, and destroy us completely. This is exactly what happened in the 90s and the early 2000s, when the so-called collective West most actively supported separatism and mercenary gangs in southern Russia. What sacrifices, what losses did this cost us then? What trials did we have to go through before we finally broke the back of international terrorism in the Caucasus? We remember this, and we will never forget. Yes, in fact, until recently, attempts to have not stopped to use us in their own interests, destroy our traditional values, and impose on us their pseudo values. The world corroded us. The world corrodes us, our people, from the inside. Those attitudes that they are already aggressively planning in their countries, and which directly lead to the degradation and degeneration because they contradict the very nature of man. It won't happen. No one has ever done it here, and I won't allow it to happen now. So I wonder what he's talking about. The thing that goes against the very nature of humanity and some of these ideologies that degrade and degenerate a society as a whole. And how about this? He even mentioned being infiltrated from within. See, what he knows is that when you bring in the democratic reign or rule or form or style of government, you allow anybody to enter in. No matter what they believe, no matter if they're contrary to your belief systems or not, they can come into power and you'll have a war within your own governmental structure. This is what's happening in this country right now. This is why we have such a great political divide and such a great social divide. Because democracy means the majority rules. And if you can switch the majority to becoming the minority, then you can rule unchecked. This is why our Constitution is so barbarically being attacked, because the Constitution puts the checks and the balances in the way of a tyrannical government and gives the power to the people. Due process under the law. Everybody having a right to be protected by the law. But as you saw with Justin Trudeau, in that form of democracy, which is not democracy at all, the leader gets to call the shots and bring oppression upon the people as soon as the people exercise their right to revolt against a tyrannical government. So in essence, it's not a democracy at all. It is a nation under the tyranny of a man who's being backed by a coalition that calls itself democratic. And so it's interesting to hear Vladimir Putin mention that this attempt to infiltrate his country with this doctrine has been going on for quite some time. And he goes on to talk about Nazi Germany invading the Soviet Union in the 22nd of June, 1941. And the leaders of Russia at that time were just sitting back watching this aggressive presence pursue its borders. And they didn't want to aggravate him. They didn't want to, to provoke him. So they didn't put up their military forces. They just tried to handle the situation diplomatically. And as a result, Germany, the Nazi army under the headship of Adolf Hitler, invaded Russia and never declared war. And millions of people were killed and captured and tortured. Children died because Russia did not prepare itself. And Vladimir Putin is saying that I will not make the mistake the former leaders made. I see an aggressive mounting of military forces outside the borders of my country. And I will not let them take the remaining, nation that is in front of me. The safeguard is Ukraine. I think he feels that if Ukraine falls to NATO, then Ukraine becomes a direct threat to Russia militarily, socially, culturally, and morally. And I don't think Vladimir Putin is willing to lay down and take that. They continue to come toward the east after he's begged and pleaded for them not to do so. Let me continue reading. Further expansion of the infrastructure of the North Atlantic Alliance, the military development of the territories of Ukraine that has begun is unacceptable for us. The point, of course, is not the NATO organization itself. It is only an instrument of U.S. foreign policy. And that's what I wanted to point out. He knows that NATO is the military arm of the United States on a global scale. He doesn't trust that we can sit in Ukraine and not be an actual military threat against Russia. And I don't think I would trust it either. The problem is that in the territories adjacent to us, I will note, in our own historic territories, an anti-Russia hostile to us is being created, which has been placed under the complete external control, is extensively settled by the armed forces of NATO countries, and is pumped up with this most dangerous modern weapon. And that weapon is not a missile, it's an ideology, psychological warfare. For the United States and its allies, this is the so-called policy of containment of Russia, obvious geopolitical divides. And for our country, this is ultimately a matter of life and death, a matter of our historical future as a people. And this is not an exaggerated opinion. It's true. This is the real threat, not just to our interests, but to the very existence of our state and its sovereignty. This is the very red line that has been taken and it's been crossed. Putin goes on to issue a very interesting threat to America. But he also says what his invasion into Russia is. I'll conclude with this. Today's events are not concerned with the desire to infringe on the interests of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. They are connected with the protection of Russia itself from those who took Ukraine hostage, and are trying to use it against us and our people. I repeat, our actions are self-defense against the threats posed to us and from an even greater disaster than what is happening today. No matter how difficult it may be, I ask you to understand this and call for cooperation in order to turn this tragic page as soon as possible and move forward together, not to allow anyone to interfere in our affairs, in our relations, but to build them on our own, so that this creates the necessary conditions for overcoming all problems, and despite the presence of state borders, will strengthen us from the inside as a whole. I believe in this. I should also appeal to the military personnel of the Ukrainian forces. Dear comrades, your fathers and grandfathers, great-grandfathers did not fight the Nazis defending our common motherhood. So that today the neo-Nazis seize power in Ukraine. You took an oath of the allegiance to the Ukrainian people and not to the anti-people that plunder Ukraine and mock us. We are the same people. Do not follow their criminal orders. I urge you to lay down your weapons immediately and go home. Let me explain. All servicemen of the Ukrainian army who fulfill this requirement will be able to freely leave the combat zone and return to your families. Once again, I insistently emphasize all responsibilities for possible bloodshed will be entirely on the conscience of the regime running the territory of Ukraine. Now, a few very important words for those who may be tempted to intervene in ongoing events. Whoever tries to hinder us, and even more so to create threats for our country, for our people, should know that Russia will respond with our response will be immediate and will lead you to such consequences that have never been experienced in your history. We are ready for any development of events. All necessary decisions in this regard have been made. I hope my words will be heard. It sounds like to me, this is just what it sounds like to me. Again, I'm no expert. This is what it sounds like to me. It sounds like Putin is at war with the deep state. He is at war with globalized democracy. Again, I don't agree with him taking Ukraine. I don't think it's right that he destroy that nation's sovereignty. And I don't think that it's right that NATO military forces are able to just go to the man's back door and set up missile sites. He did say that he had an advantage in military equipment. That's what he said. I thought that was interesting. And what he's talking about is hypersonic missile defense systems. It's pretty impressive stuff. I was actually going to put it up here for you guys to see, and I still may do that. But anyway, I just wanted to take the time to paint a different picture and give a different perspective. And I'm hoping that you, as the American people, just take the time to do a little homework for yourself. Maybe go back and look at this and get a better idea of what's really going on in the world from Vladimir Putin's perspective and not our mainstream media's perspective. Because if you think about it, if Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset and that ideology is to take root in America, America has to find itself at its most vulnerable military position, economic position, and social position. It's called a color revolution. Again, I just wanted to give you another idea. I'm plugging myself, Real Greg Kelly. I got a commercial break coming up before we conclude tonight's broadcast. You are watching The Real Greg Kelly Show. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be right back in a moment.
As a young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, half of this cabinet are actually young noble leaders of the world. So that we penetrate the cabinets. The change is not just happening. The change can be shaped by us.
We have to prepare for a more angry world. How to prepare? To take the necessary action to create a fairer world. I see the need for a great reset.
So people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had and everything will be normal again. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen.
There is only one way this pandemic is going to go. It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison. to a major cyber attack.
Isn't it funny how these people keep telling us what's going to happen? Or, hey, man, if this happens, this would be the worst thing in the world. I have no idea what the hell we going to do, man. I just don't. I don't know what we're going to do. But one thing I do know, the true spirit of America can survive. It just blows me away that these fools can say, you know, they can have an event 201, war game for a pandemic. 5 months later, it break out. And this fool here is talking about a cyber attack that can stop, you know, hospital services, transportation, shut the power grid down. Like, why are you doing this? It's because these people have lost their everlasting mind and they want to bring an end to America as America has been, so we can become, again, the greatest influence in the global economy, the global world, the new world order. And if you don't know that, I have no idea what to tell you. It is the truth. But I do want to thank everybody again. Hey, make sure you like the channel. Put a thumb up in there for me. Subscribe to the channel. Share this video, man. Make sure you share this video. I want to get everybody's insight. Make sure you comment again and share. Anybody that wanted to come up, you could have. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. And I want to thank everybody for their participation in, you know, what we are trying to accomplish here. You know, man, this is America, man. This is really the final stand. I don't know what the hell is going to happen next. I have no idea. If you want to donate to the show, man, help us continue to work and, you know, do this work. It's not easy. It does cost. There's no pressure. Do what you will. You American, you free. But if you do want to donate, right down there, man, Cash App, $, Risen Soul King. Wow, I have no idea what to do, man. You got a different perspective. I hope you share the video. I hope you stay tuned, man. Like, keep your head up. Keep your eyes on the prize. Take all the pieces of the puzzle that we've been gathering so far, man, as this nightmare of America, the great democracy has begun, the infiltration of this country. We have to stand together. We cannot be divided. We have to stay together. We have to. And it might even mean that you might have to put your differences aside, man. With people that calling themselves on the left, it don't matter. There's one thing we can agree. Our enemy is within. They've already infiltrated us. And the only way we can stand, the only way that we can sustain, preserve the Constitution and everything that our Constitution stands for is stay together. Gotta love each other. I'm signing off, man. All right? I'm gonna leave you with this. The only way America stays America is if Americans stay American. Hey, don't lay down your arms, man. Don't turn your back. Don't come off your watch. Stand guard. This is America, home of the free, home of the brave. To the day that we go to the grave. I love y'all. Peace out. Y'all know who it is. Real Greg Kelly. Show, I'm out. Ride to the music.